This happened to me last night. Basically, I went to an elementary school in my neighborhood at around 9 p.m. at night. It was a Saturday, so there was no one there. I went there and pulled out my skateboard since I wanted to practice, and it was rainy during the afternoon, so this might have been my only chance to get some practice in. My mom was in the car, taking some short clips of my skating. So I'm just skating around and pulling out some tricks when I hear, "Hello," in the creepiest high-pitched voice. It sounded like one of those dolls where if you press the tummy, a sound would come out. At first, I thought maybe someone was walking by and talking, but the sidewalk was really far away and that voice sounded way too close. I looked around the empty parking lot and it's just my mom who's still in the car. And I hear, "Hello, hello," again and again, and it sounds too close for comfort and I am genuinely freaked out then. I just happened to glance at the roof and I see this guy wearing a fucking face mask, like the ones you buy for Halloween. He's waving and has something heavy in his hand, like a brick or a rock, and he's saying hello in that high-pitched creepy-ass voice again. I noticed the brick or rock, so I grab my skateboard and run back to the car. I wasn't fucking staying there. My mom even got a clip of me running the fuck out of there. Anyway, my mom was really confused as I drove back, but she told me to turn around so she could see what was going on. So I go back and she rolls down the window. And all we can hear is screeching like someone is bursting out their lungs. It was scary as shit, so we drove back home. It was probably some teenager fucking with us, but that guy was holding a brick or something, and I would rather not get on this guy's bad side.
My brother and I worked across the street from a mini storage place, and roughly 2 years ago, we noticed they had an auction sign out front. We decided to check it out, so we walked over hoping to find something interesting. If you haven't watched Storage Wars, the way these work is the auctioneer opens a unit and you are not allowed to enter or touch anything, and you only have a window of about 15 seconds to look around and decide if you want to bid. This unit was small, 4 feet by 4 feet, and my brother and I noticed a group of 5 fishing poles amongst other boxes and bags. We've been talking about buying a few poles, and this seems like a good chance, so we yelled out a low bid and won. Per the auction rules, we had until end of day to empty out the unit. Being small, this was a 2 garbage can job, so we got a can and started sorting. It started out promising, with finding a nice microscope and a few tools, etc. Standard storage stuff. I pulled out a plastic garbage bag and opened it to find another tied shut garbage bag, which I opened to find another tied shut garbage bag. And since nothing terrifying is ever kept in triple tied bags, I opened it to find the dried mummified remains of a very old and very dry cat. My brother and I just stopped and stared at each other, and since neither of us needed a dried out cat at the moment, we weren't sure how to handle this specific piece of storage unit treasure. We did what we always do when faced with something this out of context. We just laughed uncomfortably, until we looked back into the unit and noticed 2 more tied garbage bags. At the end of the day, we found 3 bags with parts of or entire cats. We also aren't doctors, but we are pretty sure there are at least some dog parts in there as well. Granted, saying it was a storage unit full of dead cats would be a bit of an exaggeration, but considering that a storage unit generally has no dead cats, I think a small unit with 3 or 4 could be considered full. As if multiple bags of dead cats wasn't bad enough, the creepiest part of the whole thing was finding his or her creepy drawings of cats and a used pink cat food and water bowl. I spoke with the manager of the storage unit facility and explained my findings, and I asked who owned that unit. Obviously they couldn't give the name, but when I asked if they were perhaps a vet, the owner laughed and said, "Definitely not." He also said that helps explain why the person's other abandoned unit that had gone up for auction prior had been full of empty plastic cat carriers.
This happened about 4 weeks ago now, on a Saturday. I live near a coastal area that has a few popular beaches, and on this night, I was with 2 other friends. But it was really late, so there weren't really any other people around, except for the occasional police car or other visitors to the beach. We must have gotten there close to 11 p.m., and we hung around, sitting in my car and on the beach wall for a few hours. The 3 of us were talking about some sad stuff that a friend had been going through, so we were already in an upset mindset. Nothing weird happened while we were there, and there were just some other kids that would hang around for a bit and leave. We left the beach at around 1:30 a.m., and I'm driving, and I have a friend in the passenger seat and one in the seat directly behind me. The road back to town goes past a state park and goes down a rural back road with some houses along the way before you get to the main road. A white Subaru pulled out in front of us as we drove by the park a few minutes after that we left the beach. We didn't really think much of it until it started going really slow, like maybe 15 miles per hour, when the speed limit was 25 or so in the area. We weren't concerned at first, but just annoyed. This continued for a bit, and because we were on this winding back road, I couldn't pass them. After a few minutes, the road curved to the right, and I noticed something running down the side of the road against traffic and towards my car. I was very confused at first that someone was running at almost 2 in the morning. I immediately noticed that this person was dressed in all black and had a huge mane of gray hair. I told my friends to look at this shit because my attention was fixed on not driving into this very slow car in front of us. I noticed out of the corner of my eye that as this guy continued down the road towards my car, he drifted further into the road. I thought he was avoiding something on the shoulder, but a second later, my friend screamed and I looked to my left to see the guy right next to my door. At this point, I have a little bit of space between me and the car in front of us, so I floored for a second to get past him. The car does not stop though, and we keep driving for a minute or so until we reach this traffic circle where the car immediately goes back down the road we just left, and much faster than it was driving before. My friends and I were freaking out because I didn't realize what was happening, but that it was very weird. And as we drove away, my friends told me that as he got closer, they could see the guy had his face all painted white except for black circles around his eyes. He had this green clown wig on, and my friend in the passenger seat noticed that he was holding either a crowbar or a bat, and that the one seated behind me said that he was running right for my door, which was unlocked at that time because my car doesn't automatically lock, and that person was reaching out for my door, only like a foot away by the time that we got away. We called the sheriff, and they looked, but didn't find anything, and neither did we. When we were out of adrenaline rush, we went back to see where it happened. What do you think this was? At first, we didn't connect the car with the clown guy, and initially thought that maybe he had just done something like rob a house in the neighborhood. You know, because of the clown getup and the bat or the crowbar, and that he was running away from it and was gonna carjack us to get away. But my friend's mom thinks that we may have been identified when we were at the beach as targets for some kind of robbery. My only thing is that if the car was involved and they wanted to do some harm to us, they could have done it like at a stop sign so that we couldn't have gotten away. If anyone has any ideas, please comment. It was really a distressing situation in the moment, especially considering how close a call it was. And we really just wanted to have some kind of idea about what we experienced that night.
So this is my first post. What I'm going to say happened 2 years ago. I was only 10. Just so you know, my English isn't native, so feel free to correct me if I'm making any mistakes. Even my parents don't know about what happened, but hanging here and reading other people's stories made me feel the urge to share mine as well. For the context, we were in China, in a very luxurious hostel organized like that. We, as in my father, mother, little sis, and me. The entrance of the hostel is a building itself from which you had to take an elevator to access a big park. From this park, you had to walk 3 to 4 minutes to arrive in front of an approximately 30-floor building. It's designed to contain one really big suite per floor, so when taking the lift, you scan your card and it will automatically bring you to the floor associated with it. So the third day of our trip, my parents decided to go on a date together, leaving me and my sister alone in the suite. They left some cash so we could order some takeaway food. Chinese people love these. So I ordered some noodles and waited. When somebody finally called to say it was all good, I went to search the food. That's when I had my first big mistake. I didn't close the front door, thinking nobody could come here and I wouldn't be able to open it since I'd have a lot of things in my hands. So I called the lift and waited. Way too long. Then it was finally here. Somebody was in it. I politely said, "Hello." But he didn't answer. He was wearing red sweats and an Adidas jogger. I pushed the 0 button and the man headed out. The door was closed when I finally realized my second big mistake. Why the hell did he go out? He shouldn't, since there wasn't any other room except my family's. That's when I started to panic. I tried to stop the lift, but it wouldn't stop, so as soon as I arrived to the ground floor, I immediately went back to my room floor. The front door was wide open, and the absence noise made me feel uncomfortable, assuming that either my sister had been caught or she was hiding. I went for the second option because the man was taller than me. He was 1.90 m, I was 1.40 m, which meant that his footsteps must have sounded heavier than mine on the ground, and I believed in my sister's intelligence to figure that out. I finally found her hiding behind one of the sofas, crying. She told me that the man was searching in the luggage for valuable items. We played hide and seek with him for almost 30 minutes. The room was real big, and I finally went in my room and called the reception to call some security guys to arrest the man. Going in my room, I noticed my Nintendo Switch had vanished. Everything went pretty smoothly, and the man turned out to be the son of an inhabitant here, cruelly lacking of any money. Afterwards, it seemed logical because either way, how could you have come into the residence building? One creepy thing, he had a knife on him, coming from the kitchen of our suite, showing that he didn't just want some goods. So, creepy man in the hostel, let's not meet.
I just remember this encounter recently. Back in the summer of 2012, I was 22 at that time, and my friend and I had just left from a party across town, and we were parked in front of my apartment complex. It was about 3 in the morning, and we were bullshitting and talking about the party, and decided to smoke a little weed before heading into the apartment. I was in the passenger seat as I'd let my friend drive us home because he was less inebriated. Unfortunately, the car window on my side wasn't rolling down, so I opened the door to let out some smoke as I smoked a cigarette. This caused the car's inside lights to be on so my friend could load a bowl. We were parked next to the sidewalk, and the gate to my apartment was directly next to us. I see a man walking about 15 feet up the sidewalk come into view. In my state, I have very little time to react, and I'm still propping the passenger's side door open as he passes by. He and I make eye contact momentarily as he can see the two of us due to the car's lights being on. And then I get a chill down my spine. He looks almost goblin-like. He's about 5'10" and is wearing an oversized yellow hoodie and a gaunt face, with hollowed out cheeks and leathery tan skin, like he may be on something. His head and chin covered in patches of pubic-looking scraggy black hair with blonde bleached highlights. He smiles to reveal what's left of some rotten yellow teeth. He seems to be walking quickly with purpose, but stops suddenly by my door and asks, "Is this my car?" Then he yells with a raspy tone, "You stole my car!" He then grabbed my door, leaving one hand in his hoodie pocket, clearly holding something. Startled, I slam the door on his hand, and he screams trying to still hold on, so I slam it again, and he quickly pulls his hand away, and I lock the doors. He continues to shout into my window, spitting on it, and even pressing his face against it as he does. I turn to my friend, pale-faced and wide-eyed, fumbling to get the keys into the ignition as the man begins circling to the front of the car, and then pulls out a bottle of what I assume is lighter fluid out of his pocket and starts spraying it all over the hood and windshield. I look back over at my friend and he still can't get the keys in the ignition. The man then pulls out a metal lighter and starts it as he laughs and screams, "This is my car!" In a moment of clarity, I manage to grab my friend's hand to guide the key into the ignition and say, "Drive!" He then slams on the gas and peels out into a U-turn, and the man barely backs up enough to not be pinned into the car in front of us as my shoulder gets thrown against the door due to the sudden burst of speed. As we drove down the street going about 65 on a 25, I look back with tears welling up in my eyes and vaguely see the man dancing around with his lighter in the middle of the street. We blow through red lights and stop signs and don't stop for about half a mile. When we stop, I call my roommate and he walks out with a concealed firearm and says that he can't see anyone. So we return and he escorts us back inside. It all happened in a split second, and my friend remained quiet and pale-faced for about an hour after the incident, and I made sure to park inside the apartment gates from then on. This happened about 8 years ago when I lived in an apartment building in the downtown area of a mid-sized US city. It was around 11 a.m. I would normally have already been up and about for hours, but on this day, I decided to sleep in for a while. If I had been awake, I likely would have had my door propped open for a few inches to allow air to circulate, as the smell from the hallway could get stale and musty and linger inside my apartment. So, My cat and I were being lazy asses this day when we were both jolted awake by a very loud and abrupt rumble. I heard a man's loud, angry yell, and to me at that time, it sounded perhaps like noise from the construction site across the way. Maybe someone had slipped or dropped something heavy on their foot. It was all but a moment, but it was enough to encourage my cat and I to finally get up out of bed. I went about my morning, made myself some breakfast, and I had a fairly large set of windows that overlooked the street. At one point while I was cooking, I saw a series of police vehicles show up, which include what I'd call a paddy wagon and a detective vehicle. They were blocking the driveway to the parking lot, which was right beneath my window, so I had a perfect view of everything that was going on. I remember the noise that I'd heard about an hour earlier, so I thought there must have been some kind of incident. It was downtown after all, so I wasn't exactly surprised. A small group of onlookers formed across the street, and I could tell that whatever they were looking at was well out of my view, so I just continued to observe from my vantage point. At one point, I saw a man on a stretcher being wheeled into either the paddy wagon or an ambulance. I can't really recall. He had oxygen on his face, and he was shirtless, and his chest area was heavily bandaged. By then I figured there must have been a shooting in the garage below. Scary, but I still didn't think too much of it. After the police and the looky-loos left, I went about my day. I went to take my trash out later, but a police officer was standing at the end of the hall by the trash chute. I went up to the third floor, but the same deal. So I went back to my apartment with my garbage still in hand. Later that evening, I tuned into the news hoping that I'd hear anything about what happened. My mother and my grandmother actually lived in the same building. I was the only one who'd heard the noise, but we were all interested in learning what went on. Finally, we see footage of our building, along with an image of a bike that had been ditched and maybe a bloody shirt. According to the news report, a man with a warrant was spotted by police and took off on a bike. I've read different accounts that say that he stole the bike that he took off on. I've also read that the police weren't even after him, but he freaked out and ran when he saw them. I'd be apt to believe that bit, considering the warrant was for a misdemeanor. Unfortunately, there is less information on the story these days outside of one local source and a short clip on ABC News. Either way, the man ended up at my apartment building moments later. He ran inside the building, which makes the fact that I slept in that day and did not have my door open all the more serendipitous. And in a last-ditch attempt to evade the police, he decided to jump down the trash chute. On the way down, he triggered the trash compactor and was crushed to death. That was the noise that I'd heard, the rumble, the man's yell, and the building shake. I heard a man die in the most awful way. The only thing I can say is that since I didn't know what it was that I was hearing at that time, it fucks with me less. My mind doesn't associate the two events, and it all happened so fast. My mom and my grandmother had their own input. They were down in the garage a little later than the incident occurred, and they had no knowledge of what went on. But my grandmother said that she saw the maintenance guy, a really nice dude from Central America, walking by, and she said that he had a really intense look on his face. The news had said that the victim's body had been found by a building worker, and there were only 2 guys and a housekeeper or 2. And I'm sure that it must have been him that found the body. I moved out months later, and it was more just time to move up in my living situation. But I will say that I had a difficult time taking out the trash for a while after that. Hello everyone, it's your creepy sister here. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really appreciate each and every one of you. But I would also like to thank my amazing patrons, my top tippers, and my dearest channel members. Thank you very, very much. I really appreciate it with all of my heart. If you want to support the channel further, you could also choose to become a patron, a tipper, or a channel member. But remember, it's appreciated, but never a requirement. I would also like to announce that we have merch now. The link is in the description of the video, along with all my other social media links, like my Discord server, Twitter, Instagram, and others. You can connect with me and send your stories there. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and comments are highly appreciated. And remember, your fear feeds me.